Buenos dias. Good morning. So we've heard about the universe. Now I want to talk about one planet, our planet. By the end of this century, 10 billion people will live on the planet, it's projected. Most of those 10 billion people will live in cities. And one of our big burning questions is, will those cities be prosperous? Will they be equitable? Will they be ecological? And those are important practical questions. But there's another deeper question that I have, which is, will they be beautiful? Will they uplift the human spirit? Because if we answer the practical questions, but don't answer the spiritual questions, we will fail. And sometimes to answer questions about the future, we need to look to the past. So I'd ask you to travel with me. Travel with me to some of the most beautiful places on the planet. Rome's Spanish Steps, the historic neighborhoods of Paris or Shanghai, the rolling landscape of Central Park, the tight-knit streets of Tokyo or Fez, the wildly sloping staircases of the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, the dizzying stepwells of Jaipur, and the arched pedestrian bridges of Venice. So many of you may have been to these places, traveled to them, and think about how wonderful they are. But then think about what we built in the 20th century. These are 6 downtowns built across 6 continents around the world. Why do none of these places have any of the charming characteristics of the cities that we built prior to the 20th century? Or think about the suburbs. These are 6 suburbs from 6 continents around the world. And why do none of them have any of the lyrical qualities of the places that we love to visit and love to be in? What happened in the 20th century, especially around the automobile? And look at what we are building. This is a new city outside of New Delhi in India. This is a city for millions of people in China. This is a new city outside of Seoul in South Korea. Is this where we want our grandchildren and their grandchildren to live? Is this the junk we want for our future? But cities, and the fact that people are moving to cities, and today more people live in cities than they live in rural or suburban areas, are very important. And they're very important especially for our economy, but also in terms of climate change. Why? Because people, when they live in smaller apartment buildings, in office buildings, and they use mass transportation like subways, they actually use much less energy per person than driving around in cars and big houses. And the lesson from this slide is that if you really love nature, you shouldn't live in it. This is where I live, not in the park, but I live near this park with my family. My office is here. My daughter's school is near here. It is a wonderful way to live. And this is what we need our cities to be. We need our cities to be great, so they attract many people, but they attract those new green urbanites to places that are wonderful. So why is this important? Well, right now, today, oops, let's try that again. Yeah. Right now, today, every day, 200,000 people are moving into a city. Today, 200,000 people will move into a city somewhere in the world, around the world, mainly in the global south. And what cities, what kind of cities will these people live in? Are they condemned to those bland places that we built in the 20th century, or can we give them something better? So again, to answer this question, I think we need to go backwards to go forward. So many of you, I'm sure, have seen buildings like this. They were built all over the world. They exist in Mexico City. They exist in Israel and India and Italy. And they were charming. They were maybe 30 apartments built around one staircase with a light well, and you met your neighbor in that staircase. You asked them how they were doing. You climbed the stairs. Unless you had a lot of groceries, you naturally took the stairs because it was just part of the daily rhythm of your life. But unfortunately, because of our building codes and our fire codes and wheelchair codes, very important things, we can't build buildings like this anymore. Instead, what we have to build, is this. We have to, because of codes, build buildings with lots of elevators and fire stairs and these long anonymous hallways where people don't really know their neighbor. And when developers have to build all of this extra infrastructure, they need to build bigger and bigger and bigger. And what that results in is the thud, the same anonymous thud of these horrible buildings that we're asking people to live in all over the world. That are exactly the same, so you don't know anymore whether you live in Mumbai or Shanghai or Dubai. In our firm, one of the things we're starting to do is look at that old model, and we're wondering if, there we go. We're wondering if we can take something that's allowed in the International Building Code, which is to build actually 3-story buildings that are quite dense, dense enough to support mass transit, actually, where as long as we allow wheelchair access to the ground floor, we can take that prototype and make it shapeshift, use different aspects of construction to respond to local community, local climate, local culture, local construction techniques to build difference while still using that module or that prototype. And where this journey began for us in our firm is a very unlikely place, the city of Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, which is the coldest capital in the world. And a client came to us and said, you know, our city is growing, but we don't want a horrible, anonymous place. We want a place that's Mongolian. We want a place that actually reflects our culture, and our culture is nomadic. So we don't like things like shopping malls, because shopping malls control us. They try to control our space and our spending habits. So we want something that's quite different. And I wrote back our client a letter, and I said, you know, we very much respect the Mongolian nomadic traditions, but there's an urban nomadic tradition, the idea of getting lost in the city as a pedestrian, as the French call it, the flaneur. And that in getting lost in the city that you can rediscover yourself. So we started laying out this site plan with this idea that there would be no long vistas, there'd be no shopping mall. Instead, there'd be local shops down on the ground floor, and using that 3-story prototype, housing units, office space, a folk theater, even a haunted house. But that you could always get lost in that new village. And so we created this taxonomy of different types of buildings, and we're very focused on using materials that were local to Mongolia. That even though it was new architecture, it reminded people of their past. It reminded people of their identity. And that we could do things like build shading canopies or heating canopies and even capture waste heat to be sustainable, but still allow for performances and for life that happens at a wonderful pace there and outside, even in the cold weather, in a way that respects the traditions of the place. And those colors are about the spectacular light of Mongolia. The shapes of the buildings are about the mountain range around. And that we realized that that idea of respecting history, respecting identity, would also be important in places like New York. So this is an old historic factory building in the Brooklyn waterfront where we were asked to build a new office building inside of this old sugar refinery. And we realized that we could insert a new building into the old building and still respect the old building. And if this was the condition of the old building with the old factory equipment in there, with this gap from the windows to the equipment, that we could create that similar gap with a new building nesting inside of the old building and create a very unique experience that you couldn't have anywhere else, where you could actually be both outside and inside at the same time. And that from inside, you would create a new kind of creative office building that was about both the future and the past. And that, very importantly, that how the building met the ground to make sure that we were encouraging people to walk, people to be in the local parks. In fact, the park here just opened. It's about a 6.5-acre park. It's really lovely. And the idea that we would open up the entire ground floor, turn all the windows into doors, and make it very open for a cold day. You could go into that building and in and out of that building, make the experience of it very porous. You understood where the river was. And in so doing, create this new building that actually, with its big arch form, had this volume of space that announced the new, that celebrated the new, but also celebrated the history of this place. Because this building can't be anywhere else. And so as our cities grow, this is what I think we as architects are getting asked more and more. Can you give us something that can't be anywhere else? Because we are a great culture, whether we're in New York or Mexico or Mongolia, that we have to have places that respect our culture. And that actually, and the geography of this, becomes even more important as our cities grow horizontally. We used to have hub-and-spoke cities with one central business district. But now, with technology, we're seeing many, many places where people work. And if you're familiar with London, you'll know London has many high streets and many different districts where people work. We're seeing that happen in cities worldwide. And I think it's going to grow and grow to the point where we don't have this division between where people sleep and where people work. But instead, we can create a lifestyle where, like I have, frankly, where people can be within a 20-minute walk of where they live, where they work, where they shop, where they send their children to school, where they get health care, but can still be in the larger city to go see a performance, to go to the museum, and so forth. And what that means is we have to rethink our streets. We have to rethink mobility itself. And now, with technology, there is a lot of discussion about things like Uber and autonomous vehicles, but they're still just cars. And the car transformed the way we built the city in the 20th century. A technology was invented, and then the entire world changed to accommodate that technology, to build the landscape that's sitting outside of this hall. I think in the future, we should ask technologists to actually build things that accommodate human need. I don't want the world to change around a piece of technology. I want the technology to change to meet the needs of the world. So when we talk about things like autonomous vehicles, what excites me about autonomous vehicles isn't the idea that they're a driverless car, but if they can hold the promise that you can have a vehicle, unlike one that's driven by human beings, which is then susceptible to human error. So it hits things, right? It hits people, it hits cars, it hits bicycles. If a computer can be programmed to drive a car such that it doesn't hit people, it doesn't hit cars, we can rethink the street. We can think about a street that doesn't have curbs. Maybe it's made of much nicer materials. It doesn't need to have that division of sidewalk and where bikes go and where pedestrians go. And so if you think about the cities that you visit, if you go to Rome and you think about those tight little streets, why are they so wonderful? Because it's all mixed, it's all slow, it all operates at a human speed, at a human scale. And that's something that I think technology could provide in the future. We could even think about streets that get covered for winter months and then retract and become open for sunny days. And so that's, I think, where we need to head for a world of 10 billion people. And so, most fundamentally, we need to head away from this idea that the world should be this homogeneous place. Well, that didn't work. I'm going to try that one more time, sorry. There we go. We need to head away from this idea that the world should be this homogeneous place. We have to build a world of 10 billion people that sustains, amplifies, celebrates our differences. And then we'll build great cities that attract everyone, and we can allow nature to be nature, and we can build places that respect all cultures, all creeds, all religions, all colors. Build cities that are technological, but where technology serves the human spirit. Thank you very much.